Kia ora, I'm Wayne Cutfield, and together with Helen Moewaka Barnes, we're hosting this webinar for a contestable round hosted by Better Start and Cure Kids. Now, this is the second webinar in the series, and what we thought we would do is just briefly walk through an overview about the process and really manage this session as a Q&A, because many of you should be close to finishing your applications, or at least have them very well planned out, and you may have questions for us that we can help to try and address. So we'll get the slideshow underway. Now, this, as I've mentioned, is a joint funding round. It's a second joint funding round between a Better Start and Cure Kids. The first one was 3 years ago. Now, a Better Start is the only national science challenge that in fact addresses the health and well-being of children. And if you consider national science challenges and also centres of research excellence, again, there's only a single entity that addresses the health and well-being of children. Cure Kids is the only child-focused funding agency in the country. Sorry, yes. Okay, let me share screen. Okay, that makes life easier. Apologies there. Now, we believe that every child should have the best possible start in life, and that's why together we are hosting this co-funded round. The amount of money committed by the two organisations is $4 million over approximately 2 years. It's frozen. Okay. Now, Tara Satyanand may join us from Cure Kids, the Director of Innovation and Research. I'm the Director of Better Start National Science Challenge, and Helen is our Māori Strategic Theme Leader for A Better Start. Today's webinar will extend up to 60 minutes, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll pretty much focus on Q&A. The webinar will be recorded. The webinar will be recorded onto both of our websites, Cure Kids and A Better Start, so that you can go back later and listen to the presentation, and particularly the Q&A, because the Q&A may well address some of the questions you may have yourself. All audience members will be automatically muted throughout the session. If you do have a question on the way, please submit it through the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, and that will help us when we get to the end to address your questions. Now, there are some key deadlines, and we'll come to those right at the end, but the most important one that you face is that the deadline for the expressions of interest is the 17th of February 2021. Some of you are probably thinking, what time? It'll be 5 p.m, no later. You can find out more about the process from either of our two websites, abetterstart.nz or grantshelp.curekids.org.nz. In terms of funding priorities, we are seeking mission-led research, which is research that will actually make a difference to the health and well-being of our children, as opposed to science-led research in which an interesting question is asked to understand some aspect of biology, physiology, or evolution. We're seeking research that is designed to deliver practical, evidence-based solutions, which can ultimately be rolled out across communities and across the country to really make a difference. We're targeting 3 broad areas: healthy weight, successful learning, and mental resilience. If your topic, title, project doesn't fit within those 3 broad areas, then you may not be in the right place. If in doubt, seek advice. In terms of funding priorities, we'll be prioritising projects that are attempting to achieve more equitable outcomes, particularly for Māori and Pacifica communities. The age range is from conception through to adolescence, and with a particular focus on earlier in childhood, in that changes that are made earlier are more likely to have a greater impactful legacy. We're looking for innovative cross-sector and interdisciplinary approaches, and that includes using kaupapa Māori methodologies. So a single small team with a very narrow range of skills that haven't thought about Māori and Pacifica communities will struggle through this application process. Let me just come back a slide. Another really important point to mention is that projects that are mission-led need to make a difference to the communities in which we live and support and serve. And to do that, projects and themes and investigators need to have relationships and stakeholders, and they include community-based stakeholders. Because without those stakeholders, it's very hard to achieve change. So if you haven't thought about that process, you need to think about it very hard and very fast. In terms of the grant funding, it's up to $500,000 for up to 2 years. It isn't possible to extend the grant beyond that period. There's also a small group of potential applications from those who previously in the last round were successfully funded, who are seeking a further extension of their research to further evolve it into creating more meaningful impact. And those grants are up to $250K for 1 year. If you don't currently hold one of the Cure Kids Better Start grants, then you're not eligible for that $250K 1 year opportunity. Now I'd like to hand over to Helen Moewaka Barnes.
Kia ora. Yeah, so hopefully at this stage everyone's read the Vision Mataranga policy from MB and has thought about and looked at how they're addressing Mataranga Māori and Te Tiriti within their proposals. My feeling is that it's always better to think of these things as if you're in a centre, if you're in a team, if you're in a group, as opposed to when you come down to a specific proposal, then looking to try to see what does Mataranga Māori or what does the treaty mean for me in terms of this specific proposal. I mean, a lot of people will be in institutions where there is some group that can provide advice, but it's always related to the specific context and the relationships, the collaborations and the accountabilities that each centre or each institution or each team will develop within the context of their research and their relationships. So here we're just indicating that these need to be genuine. So getting an advisor or a consultant is really going to be enough to address all the accountabilities. That Vision Mataranga and the treaty is everybody's responsibility. So getting a junior researcher, for example, or having an advisor and expecting them to cover all of that off is often not going to be a very effective approach. That it's important for everybody to think about, what does this mean to me? What are my accountabilities? How does this play out? And how am I going to operationalize this throughout all of our work and throughout specific proposals? So Mataranga Māori, yeah, not very keen on this idea of unlocking potential. I think it is about mutual, respectful relationships between people, between knowledge bodies, and between methodologies and methods. So it's working out for you what it means for you in your work, in your proposal, and not being an add-on, but really understanding that these things hopefully aren't just things you're required to do, but are actually really useful things to do. They make a difference to the quality of the research that we do. They make a difference to the outcomes. They make a difference to achieving equity or pursuing equity. And they can actually enrich people's lives as researchers and give people much broader ways of looking at things and bases on which to proceed. There's no set prescription. It can't be covered off easily. It does require deep reflective thought, and it's a journey. So we want to see that people have considered these things, have really thought about them, and really come to grips wherever they are in that journey and however it applies to them in their research and in their context. Your institution may be able to give you advice, but it's not a simple thing. It is something that we shouldn't be afraid to tackle, something we should value rather than see as an obstacle or a burden or a simple add-on. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Helen. Now, Tara, I think you are with us, and
Yes.
do you want me to stop screen sharing and you to open your slides?
That's right. So if you
Yeah.
make me the host, I'll share my
Yeah.
slides.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, everybody.
Now, just to remind people, there are a number of you who have put questions into chat. Can you put them in the Q&A, please? Okay, she's got
So I'm hoping that you can now see my slide, which is about assessment criteria. Can you see that, Wayne?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Kia ora koutou, everybody. My name's Tara Satyanand. I'm Director of Research at Cure Kids. And so from a Cure Kids perspective, we're absolutely delighted to be partnering with A Better Start on this initiative. It's our 50-year anniversary this year, and Cure Kids was set up to transform the health of children in New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. And we very strongly believe that A Better Start and the work that A Better Start has done to ensure that we tackle the really big challenge of making sure that children can achieve a healthy weight, that children can learn successfully, and that children can have mental health and be resilient. We believe those things are really important. And so Cure Kids is really keen to work with A Better Start to see if we can fund some research which will really make a difference for children, particularly this year. So I would like to tautoko everything that Helen has said about the importance of Mataranga Māori and incorporating Māori methodologies and knowledge and practices throughout your research project, making sure that you've got the right people on your team and that you've talked with the communities who will benefit from this research. We have a range of assessment criteria in addition to Mataranga Māori. So as Wayne mentioned, one important one is impact. So will your research project actually produce real solutions for children in one or more of those theme areas? Excellence is obviously really important as well. And this relates to the originality of your concept and the thought which you've put into your research to design to make sure that it's a feasible study and that you've used the best possible methodology. The fourth criteria we'll be looking at throughout the process is equity. So is your research project focused on ensuring equitable outcomes for Māori children, for Pasifika children, for specific groups of children within society who might really benefit from improved health in these areas. And finally, who are you? Who's on your team? Who have you consulted? Have you got the appropriate expertise and diversity and resources around you to complete your research? So the way we'll operationalise this is that those 5 criteria are very directly translated into the form that you'll fill out. So you can see you've got to write 200 words on impact, 120 on Mataranga Māori, and so on. And the idea is that the expression of interest that's due on the 17th of February, it's a relatively short précis of your work. So about 2 pages. And that's really designed to kind of focus your mind, get the key points down. And remember, I mean, we will be looking at a huge stack of these. So make sure that you are very economical with your language and that you're really telling us the things that will set your project apart from the others. You'll need to log on to the Cure Kids portal in order to make your application. So do that as soon as possible, familiarise yourself with the website. We think it's all very straightforward, but if you run into any difficulties with the site, there is help available. So please, you'll see in places on the website, there are places where you can look for guidelines or ask any questions, and you can always pick up the phone as well. You'll need to make an account, and your institution should be on the drop-down list. Now, if your institution is not there, don't panic, but there are some criteria for the kinds of institution that you'll need to be working with. So if in doubt, look at the eligibility criteria and maybe message us or give us a call if you've got a question about whether your current institution will be eligible. Basically, the way the application form works is that there are text boxes and you just fill those out. So here I've got Vision Mataranga and the research design. It's fairly straightforward, but again, you know, you can message us if you're having any troubles over the next couple of weeks while you submit. And again, just reiterating what Wayne went through, these are the key deadlines. So Wednesday, the 17th of February is when the expressions of interest are due. We'll run a process in which we have assessing panels for each of the 3 main theme areas. They will review all of those expressions of interest. They will rank them and select the top proposals, and then we'll contact all of the applicants on Wednesday, the 31st of March, to let you know if you've been successful or not. And we will be inviting some of you to submit full proposals based on your expression of interest. And that's a longer application which goes into more detail. There's a little bit more information in the request for proposals, and you'll get more information if you're one of the top applicants. We will be running a process where we have international expert reviewers in each of the subject areas. This will include a Māori health research expert and a Pacifica health research expert. And then the assessing panels will meet again, read the full proposals with the reviews, and again, rank and select the very best. We have a joint strategy group between A Better Start and Cure Kids, and we will send funding recommendations for the boards of both our organisations and make a final decision in the week of 5th of July. And everybody who's been asked to submit a full proposal will hear back in the week of 12th July. And contracts will hopefully be completed in September with funding after that. So that's in brief the process that we are running, a little bit on our assessment criteria, including importantly Vision Mataranga. Do you have any questions for us? I can see actually that.
Now, Tara, we have a number of questions, Tara. We've got 8 questions and perhaps we can walk through them. Now, in terms of, I can help address the first couple. With respect to the invited applicants, is it only 1 year 250K that they're eligible for? No, they could apply to a full grant proposal, but it would be a different looking proposal than the 250K proposal. In other words, you can't just recycle the 250K proposal for those who are invited into both pools. We're interested in, this is from another questioner, we are very interested in looking at the difference in non-clinical outcomes for children with and without chronic disease, including resilience, anxiety, and quality of life. Would a study such as this qualify for consideration of A Better Start funding, or are you specifically looking to fund community projects as opposed to those related to healthcare? I think that would be a suitable proposal without seeing anything more in it, because it looks as if it reaches resilience, anxiety, quality of life. So that would probably appear under the umbrella of mental resilience. Now, a question that has come up again and again is that is it helpful to have a proposal that looked at more than one domain? Or does it actually, can it only sit in one domain? And the answer to that is, if you design a proposal that captures 2 or even 3 of the 3 domains we're looking at, that would strengthen the proposal, because we're trying to look at science beyond the usual business of science and the usual kind of proposals that you might write for, say, HRC. or perhaps one of the standard Cure Kids proposals. So I think the more broadly you look, then in fact that's an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Having said that, the proposal will be assessed by one panel, but we can use referees that reflect the diversity of the proposal. One for you, Tara, and that's about the 250 versus 120 words.
Yes, apologies on that. So my slide was wrong and the one on the portal is correct. I've just double checked that.
Cool. Under the equity criteria, who are the other key groups specifically? And in essence, these are the groups who tend to have poorer health and wellbeing outcomes, and often they are those who are socially and financially disadvantaged. So really it's trying to improve the health and wellbeing of all New Zealanders and not just those who are already advantaged and have good health and wellbeing. Does the main applicant, the lead applicant, have to be a tertiary institution? Tara, do you want to answer that?
So no, so that could include a range of different institutions. We have more information on the portal as to which institutions we've already done due diligence on and provided funding through. And we can also add your institution if it's not there. So please do give us a call. If your institution is not already on the list of organisations which Cure Kids has funded before, we may well be able to add it. We'll just need some documentation from you, and there are a series of questions that we need to ask.
Thank you, Tara. Is there only going to be one successful applicant? No, there will be a number of them. There could be as many as up to 8 fully funded projects. It's likely to be a blend of 500K projects and 250K projects. So it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 10 or 12.
Yeah.
So that's how it will finally balance out, and it will be based on quality of the applications. And just to let you know that there is, to enable different proposals from different theme areas to be compared in the final wash, we will be doing that by having some sort of consistency measures across the panels. The other thing to bear in mind, and this question was asked of me outside of this session, is it a disadvantage for a junior investigator to be the PI? And the answer to that is no. What the applicants as a team need to represent is they need to represent experience in the proposal that they are submitting, and they need to be able to show that they've got the relationships required to deliver the research. So having a team with very, very heavy CVs who are not well connected to stakeholders and may not have the depth of expertise in specifically what they're trying to achieve will not necessarily help.
Thanks. There's a question about whether the application form is the same for the $500,000 and the $250,000 grants. I think if you've been invited to come back after being successful in the first round, we would really expect more focus on how the new funding will translate the previous research. And so you'll see the form is different and separate on the portal, and it does have a slightly different emphasis. So those people already know who they are, and it's really about how they'll translate their work into real impact for children.
Another question is the 3 themes state: reduced overweight obesity in children younger than 5, and increased attainment of national reading standards of 5 to 6 years, reduced mental health problems in adolescence. And that comes from the Better Start website. We're adopting a sort of a more broader approach, hence from conception through to adolescence, and that does apply to all 3 themes. Having said all of that, to be most impactful, the earlier the intervention, then the greater the opportunity is to have an effect. But that doesn't mean that it must only focus on those sort of up to preschool and early school years. In terms of having an interdisciplinary team, could you give an example of the ideal research team? And in fact, we can give you an ideal proposal. No, we won't be doing that. An ideal interdisciplinary team would be one that includes a range of different disciplines. So in other words, they're not just biologists or bench scientists or clinical scientists, that there are those who can have community skills, and often it helps if they straddle multiple institutions in terms of how you put together a group working with a community. So across institutions isn't an absolute requirement, but what would be disappointing is to see a proposal from 5 people who all came from a very, very narrow discipline. And I'm not wishing to pick on any group, but if it was a group of nutritionists who focus specifically on early childhood nutrition in preschool children, and that's where all of their expertise is, that's a very narrow range of disciplines. Did you want to add to that, Tara?
No, I think that's clear. There's a question about whether the funding will support PhD students. And how will that work given that it's really only for 2 years? So the fund can support salaries for people who are on sort of soft funding, but no to PhD stipends. I recommend you go to look on the portal. There's an area with some guidelines on the budget and exactly what can and can't be covered in terms of, say, equipment and salaries and so on. There's some additional information that will require as part of your application if you would like to fund some salaries.
Will the 3 themes remain the same for subsequent years? I'm assuming that relates to this cycle, this grant proposal, and that is indeed the case. If we're talking about future years for potential contestable rounds between the 2 groups, that is not yet planned, and so I wouldn't assume that you can just wait for the next one whenever it appears in a couple of years' time. Do you want to answer the next one, Tara?
Yes, there's a question about are there guidelines in terms of how the budget can be used, which I think we've covered. Yeah, there's more information on eligibility, on budget, and if there's something which is not covered, we also have a frequently asked questions, and if you've got a question out of the box, let us know and we'll add it to the FAQ page as well. Please email us or get in touch via the portal.
Now, are there any more questions? But we'll wait just a few more minutes while you gather your thoughts. There have been a lot of really helpful questions, and of course, the questions and the answers will be recorded for those who couldn't make today's session. And arguably, the answers to your questions are as important as the overview.
We can also share the slides from today on the website as well, so that those are available for people, and I'll fix up the number of words.
Just to reiterate, these proposals are quite different to standard proposals in that they require a depth of relationship with stakeholders and communities that otherwise doesn't necessarily occur with projects where you can find a question, design it, and then focus on a small group of people whom you select. And that doesn't require the depth of relationships. Now, relationships with stakeholders take time. You can't just develop them in 5 minutes. And so for many of you, you would have been planning this proposal for some time. It's really difficult to build a proposal like this in a few weeks. We've got some more questions.
There's a question about whether there will be future funding rounds with a Better Start and Cure Kids. And the answer is that we certainly would hope so. But at the moment, this is the one that we're focusing on. Wayne, actually, you might be able to answer that better than me.
Yes, a very diplomatic response, Tara. So the National Science Challenges are funded for 10 years, and that period is up in mid-2024. Now, is it possible that the National Science Challenges will have a life beyond that? It is possible, but we don't know that yet. We won't know for a number of years. So it's really difficult to paint further into the future. We're optimistic, but we don't yet know. It'll require a decision from Cabinet. Is there a minimum FTE requirement to be allocated to PIs and named investigators? No, there isn't a minimum. And just as you're probably aware, overheads are attracted, but it's Cure Kids don't attract overheads, whereas A Better Start attracts full overheads. And so when you put it together, it's sort of half overhead rate in essence. But these are not huge grants. And if you fill them with academic FTEs, you'll very quickly spend all of your money on academic FTEs. So I think we would hope that, in fact, proposals are not loaded with academic FTEs.
There's a question, an interesting question actually. Is there a preference for projects targeting large rather than small populations? For example, would projects targeting specific populations be viewed as weaker than those targeting the general population? That's a really difficult question to answer without seeing the actual proposal, but I think the answer is no. I think that if there were a project targeting a specific population, as long as it was answering a genuine unmet need and the research project had the potential to really have a significant impact in that small population, that would stand just as good a chance as something which targeted the whole population, but perhaps wouldn't have such great impact. Do you agree, Wayne and Helen?
Yes. Helen, do you want to comment? You're muted, Helen.
Muted and unmuted. Again, you know, it's always difficult for us to say because you will have the reviewers who are going to look at those proposals and judge them on their merit. Sometimes if you're looking at equity, you do need to target specific populations. Sometimes if you make it too broad for the general population, you're not going to realistically be able to meet those aims because these aren't huge projects. So I think it's about making a case for what you're doing and for the significance of what you're doing and that it stands on its own merits.
Agreed.
Excellent. Now,
there's a question about if there's a proposal that targets more than one of the three themes. And I can say that yes, from the portal, you will have to choose which of the three you think it's most targeted towards. Just the way that we have the portal set up, and we also have 3 separate assessing panels. So unfortunately, you will have to make a call as to which of those buckets you think it will have the biggest impact in. However, we will also take into account that it, you know, straddles more than one area.
And just as I mentioned early in the overview, that in fact, one of the ways we will try and address that and make sure that the proposal is fairly and appropriately judged is to include referees that will more widely fit the range of the components of the proposal. And dare I say it, I think projects that can do that would be almost advantaged in terms of being able to do something that isn't just business as usual. Now, is the deadline for the invite-only applications the same as the EOIs, Tara?
Yes, that's right. It is the same. There's also a question about, because the word limits are so short for this initial stage, is it possible to include numbered references? And not at this stage. So what we're really hoping for is that you'll be very concise and try to really give us the key points in this expression of interest. And then of course, hopefully you'll be invited to present a full proposal, and there you'll have more space for the detail and a full list of references.
Helen, do you want to answer that question about the right Māori partner for our project?
I mean, of course, you can always indicate things, and intentions are better than nothing, but you know, it is difficult, I think, when you don't actually have something in place, which would obviously be the strongest argument you could put forward. And that also when you have something in place, that can shift your design, it can shift your methodology, it can shift your methods. And so having things in place can actually help inform the proposal itself. So yeah, you course can indicate intentions, but it's not an ideal situation. And I think the short answer is no, we don't help with finding a proper Māori partner. But hopefully knowing your area, you may know who the players are, or at least have some idea of who the research is important to, who it matters to, who are the people who may have aspirations in relation to that research or may already be working or want to work in that area. So about knowing your research area or finding out about your research area, which, you know, I assume you've been trying to find someone, but all I can say is, you know, to keep going on that journey.
Potentially see if you can work with your research institution and ask if they can help to put you in touch with the Māori community.
Another question asked, I'd like more clarity about the project going beyond the pure science question. Would projects that include answering the science question followed by a pilot of the intervention be considered as appropriate? It is difficult to make significant and meaningful impact if we haven't answered the science question. That is a reasonable approach, but I would warn the person who's asked this question is that you've got 2 years. So the clarity of the science question component would need to be done quite quickly because there wouldn't be time to pilot it to be able to achieve both in 2 years. So if that's the approach, it would need to be well planned. So yes, it is possible, but it would need, the applicants would need to demonstrate sufficient planning and time to be able to complete the pilot.
And perhaps also in the application, really make it clear that, you know, it's absolutely fundamental to answer that pure science question, but that really set out what the end goal is, and that the aim is to produce a targeted intervention.
And drawing the connections between the question, the answer, and the pathways to impact and transformation. So you may not actually implement something, but you'll have a clear idea of how this is going to be used, who might use it, and perhaps have some of those relationships in place and being able to be demonstrated.
Yes.
It's a very good point you raise, Helen, in that some applicants forget that they need to paint the path of the pathway and assume that everybody can join the dots up themselves, and they shouldn't assume that at all. They should make it very clear from what they're doing, what the pathway to impact is. Now, I'm just checking to see if we've got any more questions. I think we're, wait another moment or two.
I think we've done most of them. Please let us know if you've asked a question and you feel we haven't answered it exactly.
Just one thing to say too, in terms of treaty advancement in your research areas, there's some very useful resources on the Health Research Council website. So I'd recommend having a look there. And it's about getting people to think about how the treaty and Vision Mataranga Māori advancement relate to people's areas of research.
Okay. Well, we've had almost 70 people involved in today's webinar, which is great, and lots of interaction. You have a word limit for each section. Can we add in any diagrams in addition to this or post some later? The word limit's the word limit. So if there are, Tara, you may have a view. If there's a diagram, then it needs to fit within the word limit.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. Let me just check. No, there's no space to upload any diagrams. So again, really sorry, but for those expressions of interest, we're really hoping that you can fit on 2 sides of an A4 all of the key information. And yeah, it is hard when a diagram can sometimes give 1,000 words, but we'll just have to look forward to seeing the diagram at the full proposal stage, unfortunately. Do what you can. Everybody has the same constraints, so at least it's a level playing field.
How are we going? We'll just wait a few more moments. We look forward to seeing your applications.
Yes.
And from the Q&A, it sounds like there's some innovative thinking out there, and we certainly applaud that.
Thank you so much.
Helen, would you like to close our webinar?
No, just, well, yes, no. Thank you everyone for coming, and yeah, we do. We look forward to seeing the proposals and getting some really good projects going. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Any questions, go to either the Better Start or the Cure Kids website or the portal.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Ka kite.
Ka kite anō.